Hi, this is Pastor Barbara, aka Preacher with Parrots. Today is December 18th, 1 week from Christmas Day, 2016. We're in our Sunday evening program. That means New Testament. But before we get into the New Testament, there's a couple of stories, Christmas related, that I'd like to tell you about. I hope to continue with a friend of mine in the next either Wednesday or Sunday uh, on one of the stories. But let me tell you the story as I used to do it, even when I was a traveling evangelist. And I got out an old, I think we have a guest whose name I can't pronounce. Lika, I'm not even going to try. It looks Hawaiian to me. Um, Welcome to the program. Anyway, so we are live on Sunday evenings in the New Testament, making a few changes today because Christmas is as close as it is. Okay. Uh, I remember even when I was traveling, I used to tell this story. And back in those days, I had a bigger guitar. I have a smaller guitar now that's in the closet that I got it out and showed it to somebody a month or two ago, and I haven't even played it. I haven't even tuned it. It's brand new. And I don't know how long it would take me to tune it now. I haven't even played it for a while. I think I could only play in a couple of keys now, and I don't have what's called in Spanish callo. I don't have right now the calluses on the end of my fingers, so I wouldn't be doing very good. But I used to tell this story around Christmas. And the story has a couple of different versions. But this is the one that I knew about and the one that I used to tell. And then we used to sing Silent Night with me playing the guitar. In about 14, 12, 14, in Austria, there was a church. The name was St. Nicholas, which makes me laugh because it makes me think of St. Nick, Santa. But it was a church in Austria, which is a small country in Europe. And the pastor, his name was Father Mohr, M-O-H-R. And they speak German there. In the story, as I first learned it and believed that it was the only story out there for years, he pastored this rather small church. And in Austria, in Germany, in that part of Europe, the weather is very similar to what it is in much of the United States. So they have nice warm summers and cold, snowy winters. And the story goes that he was on his way to visit a woman from his congregation, a parishioner, who had just had a baby. And of course, he was walking in the snow. It was a starlit, moonlit night, very beautiful, very peaceful. And since it was getting close to Christmas time, he was thinking about what they were going to be doing in their church for Christmas. And the words to the song Silent Night, Holy Night came to him. And when he got back home, he wrote them down. A little bit of time went by, and Gruber, Gruber, Franz Gruber, was the church musician. He was also the teacher in the local school. And by the way, I forgot to do this before. Larry, would you do me the favor of going to ops only? Once I start talking, I don't answer anything that's on the screen, so I usually cut that off so that it doesn't distract me, and then I come back. So that about half the people here aren't able to communicate with me during that time. But if you're new and you wonder why am I doing that, that's the reason. And thank you for understanding. He talked with Mr. Gruber, who was the school teacher. He was also the organist and the music director for this church that Father Mohr was pastor of. He gave him the words to Silent Night and asked him if he could write music for it. And Franz Gruber wrote the music to Silent Night, Father Mohr having written the words in German. Stille Nacht, Silent Night. When it came time to do the Christmas program, the organ broke down. You'll have heard me talk how things were when I was a child, 75, 80, 85 years ago. And we didn't have a place where we could go take knives to have them sharpened, but every once in a while somebody would come down the street. In those days, mothers always stayed at home, so there was always somebody at home. And if the person who sharpened knives or sold ice or whatever came down your street, if you needed something, that is what, when you had it done. Well, people that fixed organs were the same way. You couldn't, 200 years ago, just email somebody and say, like I did, I was going crazy trying to get somebody to work on my organ so that I could do more with Christmas music this year. And even with email, it's a hassle. They want a credit card number before they'll answer your question. And my only question is, can you come to Lake Arrowhead and install a converter? If you can't, it's either yes or no. You don't need a credit card number to tell me if you're free to do that. It's yes or no. But even nowadays with email and telephone and all of that, it's so hard to get something like that done. But organ repair people knew where organs were, and they would go to see if work was needed to be done on an organ. So it was a long time before the church got an organ repair person. But on Christmas Eve in forgot the date. I was looking at it a little bit ago. I think 1818, and I thought, no, I won't forget that. When it came time for the Christmas program, now you have to understand, some instruments are not instruments you play in churches, at least in some churches. I can remember when drums weren't played in churches. Whoa, I got a problem here with a pop-up. Let me see if I can get that taken care of. Are you sure you want to cancel? Of course I want to cancel. I wouldn't be pushing on the buttons if I didn't. Okay. And so the only instrument available, since the organ wasn't working, was a guitar. But Franz Gruber could play the guitar. And the big program for that night was the presentation of a new song, Silent Night, and the people learned it, and the people sang it, and it was accompanied by the guitar. That's how the song happened to be written. And that's the first instrument that was used to accompany Silent Night. But now, how did Silent Night get to be the most popular Christmas carol around? When the organ repairman finally got there and repaired the organ, and I haven't had a piano since I moved up to the mountain. I came with only keyboards. The organ was acquired later, and I sold the piano. It's getting a piano up the steps up here would be like almost impossible. But I recall anytime I would have the piano tuner come, they would play a little tune or a little something, and then they'd say to me, you sit down, you play, you tell us if it's satisfactory. And this is what happened over 200 years ago when the organ at St. Nicholas Church was repaired. He said, all right, play something. See how you like it. Is it working to your satisfaction? So Franz Gruber sat down and played the Silent Night. He had never played it on the organ. The organ had just been fixed. The organ repair person, I guess in those days it was okay to say repairman. Now you have to say person or Women's Lib is going to get after you. The repairman was so impressed with the song that as he went, mostly, I mean, there were wealthy people who had organs in their home, but most organs were in churches. A few were in large buildings or auditoriums, but most were in cathedrals and in churches. And as he went from place to place fixing organs, he introduced the song Silent Night, and it was a couple of years before it caught on that way. When I talked to Zach Gruber about it, he told me, well, the story is just that. It's not precise in every way. I've read since then on the internet and in books and in different places other stories of how Silent Night happened to be written. They were all written by Father Mohr. It was walking in the winter, close to Christmas, over snow on a peaceful night, that he created the words to Silent Night and went home and wrote it down. Just how close to Christmas they were, I'm not sure. There are different stories. The story about the organ not working is true. Nothing added, nothing taken away. And the fact that they used the guitar is correct. I have read stories where the words were written actually 2 years before the music. There is a little chapel in Austria, and I think when I discussed this with you 2 or 3, maybe 4 years ago, I showed you pictures of them. Uh, but Zach was the one who told me that the story is sometimes a little bit different. Um, I wanted to see if he had ever been interviewed by somebody else, and I could use that interview. Um, and I can't find that he has been. So I'm going to see if I can get him to, if I can interview him Wednesday night. And if I can't, if he's got a little time, I took Skype off of my computer. But my telephone has, you know, you can set it up to hear it. And I have pictures of him, and I think I could do a halfway decent interview just on the phone. But I'm going to try to email him when I get off tonight. I'm on the West Coast. It's 5:45 here. So it'll be around 7 when I get through. 9 for him. He can pick it up in the morning, but he's pretty good about answering his mail. And I'll see if I can either interview him live, or I would be very happy if anybody else is in. Now, what makes me think that maybe he has done other interviews was when I first talked with him, I asked him if he knew of a piano repairman, organ repairman. There was some, it wasn't what I need to have done now. It was something else. This is an older organ. And he said the only organ he knew anything about was this one that I just showed you pictures of. The Disney Organ Hall that I knew years ago as the LA Philharmonic building. And he told me, and you've got to know what a cool, friendly person he is, that other people would do this. Around Christmas, one year, a few years ago, the folks there at Disney Organ Place in downtown Los Angeles gave him a private audience, and they played Silent Night on this massive, tremendous organ. And that made me think that a lot of people know who he is. Now, his father, who last Christmas about this time was not feeling well, his father would be the great, 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 great grandson of Franz Gruber. And my friend Zach just put 6 greats in there. There's another story I want to tell you, and then I'm going to turn the video that, or turn the computer that is recording for my YouTube account off, and we'll go to the New Testament and finish up what we were doing there. The other story I wanted to tell you, and this is the one that was 1414. This is, I think I confused the date of the writing because I've been researching both of them the last couple of days. There's a story, and I believe this was 1414. It was during World War I. And it has to do with how well known Silent Night is. Now, 202 years ago is not a long time for Europeans. but it is for Americans. This was during the time of the First World War. Now, you've heard me talk about the Second World War. I was 10 years old when Pearl Harbor in Hawaii was bombed. I was 14 years old. Just probably 13 years old when the USA made peace with Europe, and it was called VE Day, Victory in Europe Day. But this was about the middle of May in 1947. About 4 years after the war started. And I had had a driver's license for all of 2 weeks when the war ended. And it was called VJ Day, Victory in Japan. But this is World War I. And Belgium, France, and England were allies. And they were fighting against the Germans. The line where the English and her allies were, and over here where the Germans were, there's a space in between called no man's zone or no man's area. And now we use planes, now we use helicopters, we use all kinds of vehicles. But if you go back a couple hundred years, it was more like people running around with guns. A new pope, Pope Benedict, I don't know the which, had been elected around September. And of course, Christmas comes in December, 4 months more or less later. And when he took office, Pope Benedict suggested that it would be nice to have a time, because there were Germans who were Christians, and there were English, Belgium, and French who were Christians and Catholics. And he had suggested it would be nice to have a time of peace on the Lord's birthday. We know that this was not the Lord's birthday, but the Catholic Church had that day free, and we're looking for a time to celebrate close to a pagan worship date, and that's where December 25th comes from. So it was the day the church had chosen to give emphasis and celebrate the birth of Christ. Christmas, C-H-R-I-S-T, is Christ. Mass, M-A-S. If you add an S to Christ and get Christ's, plural, Mass, you get C-H-R-I-S-T-S, M-A-S-S. So Christmas is Christ's Mass, or the Mass Catholic Church does on December 25th. So the Pope had asked them some 4 years, more or less, before to consider this. Whether this had anything to do with it or not, we don't know. And just as there are some minor changes in the story of the writing of Silent Night, there are a few changes in the story of Christmas Day. No Man's Land was, I believe, about 100 feet. If you're 100 feet from where there are other people and they're talking and doing things, you can hear it. The story that I first heard, and I didn't know there were other stories that were mostly similar but a little bit different. The Germans were singing Silent Night, Holy Night, Stille Nacht, heilige Nacht. And of course the language was different, but the tune, the melody was the same. What Franz Gruber had to, his part in the song was the same. And 100 more or less feet away, the English, Belgian, and French are recognizing the song. So they sing it in English, Silent Night, Holy Night. And here's where you get different stories. But they became a little friendly. I have always heard for many, many, many years, I heard this when I was a kid in school, that they exchanged gifts. Now, how does a person, how do soldiers that are fighting each other in a war, and they're 100 or so feet away from each other, what do they have to give each other? Well, maybe a stick of gum, maybe cigarettes, who knows? But because it was Christmas, and it hasn't been until recently that doesn't mean a whole lot. 40 years ago, somebody could have said, but it's Christmas, and everybody said, oh, I understand. Now it doesn't seem to mean a whole lot. I think I told some of you that I was out by the grocery store. Somebody was dressed up like an elf and they were dancing around, and they had what looked like they were copying what the Salvation Army used to do. They had the big kettle there. There wasn't a thing about Christmas. There wasn't a thing, not even a secular word about Christmas. Forget there was nothing religious about Jesus or his birth. The word Christmas wasn't there. The word holiday wasn't there. The only thing that was there was some red and green letters and a girl dressed as an elf. So I didn't put any money in. Hey, they can't write Christmas, God bless you, on the sign. They don't need my money. Not that they lost out by a whole lot. But I had somebody from an insurance company call me, and they wanted to set a date to go over my policy. And I thought, I'm going to try something out. Instead of saying goodbye, I said to her, Merry Christmas. And she said something back to me. And I said, by the way, do they tell you guys not to say Merry Christmas unless the client says Merry Christmas, but not to bring the subject up if the client doesn't bring it up? And she laughed and she said, how did you know? And I said, well, that's just good business, I guess, because so many people get offended so easily by so little that it would seem to me that businesses would not go out of their way. If you're just doing business about insurance on the phone, they wouldn't go out of their way to say Merry Christmas. You know, when I was a kid, the Jewish community never minded that we said Merry Christmas. They just knew that that's what we did at Christmas. And we knew that they celebrated Jewish New Year's, and we didn't get upset. We were different, but we were friendly in our differences. But now it doesn't take much to get somebody upset. The story goes on that not only did they sing Christmas songs together, occasionally a German would shout an English word. It seemed to be English on this side, even though there were French in Belgium with them, and German on this side. They would, one or two words that they knew in the other language, they would shout, and they were friendly. And there's even a story about them playing soccer in the middle of this no man's land where they were supposed to be in between the two. Don't know. But those are two stories, both of them true. How precise what I just told you is, I don't know, because it's history and I wasn't there. So I can't vouch. I don't know any of the people who were. So I can't vouch for some of the preciseness of these stories. But it certainly is a whole lot different than the way things are. I'm going to see if I can bring you more information this coming Wednesday. And I'll do my best, and I'll let you know, those of you that get my mailing, I'll let you know what's happening. And I'm going to close this video at this time. And pretty soon, after we chat a little bit, we will go into our Bible story in the Gospels. So until the next video, blessings on you.